record. Welcome everyone to the place-based water planning webinar, where this is being hosted as a follow-up to the Rogue Water Forum, which was hosted back in September. I'm Jill Smedstad. I'm the Executive Director with Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District. Together with Craig Harper with the Rogue River Watershed Council, we've been co-convened the Rogue Water Forum in the fall and have been kind of together with Sue as well as some other folks from around the region, kind of coordinating and exploring what place-based water planning could look like in the region here. So at the Water Forum in September, we had over 110 folks join us in person for a day of learning and sharing concerns and opportunities around planning for a secure water future in the region. And this is a follow-up to that, where we had briefly covered what place-based planning was at that forum, but today we're doing a deeper dive, as we kind of promised at the forum, around what is place-based water planning. So we'll have some staff from the Oregon Water Resources Department presenting about the place-based planning process and the grant opportunity that goes along with it, as well as Herb Winters with the Gilliam Soil and Water Conservation District, who's one of the co-conveners for the Lower John Day place-based planning pilot programs, one of the organizations or groups that's been through this process already. So please, you should all, it looks like most people are muted, but make sure you please keep your mics muted while you're not talking. We are going to be collecting questions. Craig and I will be monitoring the chat to capture questions. We'll be asking folks to hold their questions though, or we'll be responding to them after each presentation. So also, because of the large number of folks on the webinar, we'll be holding questions till the end of the presentations, and we might be consolidating some of the similar questions, or there's a chance we might not be able to get to all of the questions, and we'll try to follow up by email if that is the case. Okay, I think I covered all the housekeeping parts.
Can I add a little bit to that,
Sure.
Jill? Do you mind? I was just going to suggest that if during the presentation you have a question, because I imagine y'all will have really good questions, that you might put it in the chat. And then if somebody else has that question as well, if you would put a little like on it, then that will indicate to Jill, like, oh, 12 people want to know the answer to this question. I think I'll ask this one first when the presentation's over. So just a thought. When it started to get up into like 40, 50 people, we started getting a little more thoughtful about how to manage questions.
Yeah. Yep. And I think for those that are joining us after we started, just letting you know, we are recording this webinar and we'll be able to share it out to folks that weren't able to join. We're recording the presentations part, and then we'll be pausing the recording during the Q&A section. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue Parrish, who was just speaking. She is the community outreach coordinator for Southwest region of the Oregon Water Resources Department. She's been a real key partner in these efforts that we've been doing in the region around exploring place-based water planning for Southern Oregon Inland Rogue. And I'll let her kind of, there's a last minute change in presentation with her joining on. So I'll let her kind of give that little explanation, but I'm going to turn it over to Sue, and I'm also going to screen share.
Great, thank you. And then I can't see the screen anymore. Is the presentation up on the screen yet? Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Sue Parrish from the Oregon Water Resources Department. As Jill said, I live outside of Grants Pass, actually, by Fish Hatchery County Park. Lili Prahl, my friend and teammate, is on the webinar right now, and she was going to give this presentation, but she has laryngitis. So it's coming out of my mouth, and it was from Lili's brain. Lili just wanted me to express her apologies for not being able to give the presentation, but obviously she cannot. So we're going to start the presentation with a brief history of place-based water planning in Oregon. Why did it start? How did we get here? Talk about the current program, and then finish it up with an overview of an upcoming grant opportunity, which I think Jill talked very briefly about at the forum. So next slide. So place-based water planning was first recommended when they created the very first integrated water resources strategy in 2012. And the IWRS, as we call it, for those of you who don't know, it's like a statewide framework that 15 state agencies got together and identified how to better understand and meet Oregon's in-stream and out-of-stream water needs. And so all of those agencies, this plan guides a lot of their work as an agency and provides a framework that we all contribute towards the success. So as a result of that initial recommendation that, it would be really good to have locally led planning and support regions around the state to be successful, OWRD developed some draft guidelines for place-based water planning, and that was back in 2015. That same year, the legislature provided funding to initiate some place-based water planning pilots. Next slide. So in 2015, OWRD opened a grant solicitation to pilot the first place-based water planning regions. There was a lot of interest. There were 82 initial inquiries, 16 letters of interest, and then ultimately 4 regions received funding and agency support for place-based water planning. And those places are highlighted on the map in blue. They include the Mid-Coast, the Harney Basin, the Upper Grand Ronde Basin, and of course the Lower John Day, which you will hear more about from Herb. Since those initial pilot groups began, the Deschutes Basin Water Planning Collaborative has also started place-based water planning. So there are unofficial fifth pilot. Next slide. So starting in 2022, those pilot planning areas each completed and adopted their plan through consensus, and they received state recognition so that now they're part of a recognized network of place-based planning pilots. I'm going to talk more about what that recognition means in a little bit, but at its most basic, it means that their plans follow the place-based water planning guidelines and they're officially part of the network. Next slide. So in 2021, the pilot planning groups are well on their way to completing their plans. And OWRD, knowing that their funding and authorization were about to sunset, realized it's important to figure out if these programs should be made permanent and to look at how we could improve it if we did so. So we initiated a full program evaluation. OSU and the National Policy Consensus Center conducted an evaluation of all the program participants. So the state agencies involved, all the planning groups, different water interests involved, and came up with 11 key lessons learned. And then in 2022, a work group made up of conservation groups, agricultural water users, municipal water users, environmental justice organizations, tribal interests, and state agencies examined state-supported water planning and came up with 19 recommendations for if you're going to establish a permanent fund, then these are our recommendations. And those various studies and resources, the work of the planning, the work group recommendations, the independent evaluation are all available on our website if you're interested. Next slide. The legislature used those lessons learned and recommendations to establish a permanent place-based water planning program. And the new program rules approved in 2025 helped establish the program we're describing here in the following slides. The recommendations also informed an updated place-based water planning handbook. The handbook was out for public comment earlier this year. I know a few of you offered comments. Thank you. And we expect to release the final handbook for use by interested regions shortly. Next slide. So those are some broad strokes about how we got to where we are today. Let's dig into what place-based water planning is all about. The goal of the planning process is to develop an integrated water resources plan for a particular region. So including a balanced representation of in-stream, so worrying about and thinking about all the needs of in the streams, and out-of-stream water interests like people, agriculture, forests, all those different interests, looking at groundwater and surface water, examining water quantity, water quality, and ecosystem needs. So putting that all together, thinking about your region in total, and then working together to develop a plan.
Dude, somehow you accidentally muted yourself there. I know. Just the last 5 seconds.
Unmute. I am unmuted now?
Great.
Okay, thank you. I don't know how that happened. So the plans are useful in part because they're locally adopted. So you all would decide that you all agreed you wanted this agreed upon plan, and it's state recognized and it's consensus driven. So there's not one interest dominating or the state dominating or the local region dominating. Everybody is working in sync. As part of the plan, participants develop a work plan to implement, which identifies potential projects and next steps for things that you all have prioritized. It also means that it may be used to apply for continued coordination funding. So if you were approved and you had a plan, you could continue applying for funding. And state agencies may continue to provide support as well in terms of technical assistance. And regions are also considered when the state updates its integrated water resources strategy. So again, you're in the state network. Lastly, planning collaboratives may have access to additional technical assistance and shared learning opportunities. So that's some of the benefits that you have. Next slide. I think I was a slide behind. Sorry, let me keep going. Sorry, y'all. I'm doing my own thing over here. Okay, good. So place-based water planning follows a set of planning principles, which you'll be able to find in the final handbook. We've highlighted a few here. First, this process is entirely voluntary and is locally led. It is based in collaboration and transparency and brings together a broad coalition of water interests that represent the unique water needs of your region. The solutions and plans you generate help your region sustain its water supply. It is also done in partnership with the WRD and other state agencies. As I said before, we all work together. So next slide. I want to briefly touch on what the partnership with state agencies looks like in practice. In addition to grant funding, you also get agency support. Agencies support planning groups as their resources and capacity allow, but they offer technical assistance and different kinds of participation. That includes us, the Water Resources Department, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Environmental Quality, Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, Oregon Department of Agriculture, Department of Land Conservation and Development, Oregon, and the Oregon Health Authority. So a lot of agencies that you end up with a lot of close relationships with and that you can get support from. A big part of planning is examining the water resources and needs in your basin, and agencies provide technical assistance for that process. This was essential during the pilots, and we have been working really hard to develop some proactive technical assistance based on what we learned with the pilots. Agencies may also participate in meetings and provide process support for all stages of planning. Once a plan has been adopted and state recognized, agencies will identify plan solutions and projects that are within their purview and communicate to the planning groups how they might be able to support them. This may include things like leading or supporting strategy implementation, serving on a work group, or writing a letter of support, among other things. Next slide. So there are 4 main phases of planning. The first is planning, readiness, and evaluation and preparation, or PrEP, followed by plan development, then plan implementation. At some point in the future, we expect there will be a 4th phase where plans are needing to be updated. You can find out a lot more about each of these phases in the forthcoming handbook, but I'm going to do a brief overview now. Next slide. We heard during the evaluation period that there really needed to be what we now call step 0 for groups to spend time building relationships and figuring out if place-based water planning is really the right step for them. This has become the PrEP phase. It is a time when interested parties from the community come together and assess their readiness for place-based water planning. This might include things like data assessments or community capacity building and relationship building. In this phase, the potential collaborative starts to understand their local situation and the capacity required to plan. It is also a great time to select a local convener. The grants to support this phase are designed to be smaller, shorter grants. They have a lower barrier to entry and really just get folks ready to get started. Next slide. So the next phase, plan development, is what we often think of when we say planning. It is when the group gets together and does the work to develop their plan. Next slide. There are 5 steps to plan development. These are listed on the screen. The first step is to build a collaborative, inclusive, and integrated process. Included in this step is inviting diverse interests to the table that represent all your different interests, as we talked about before, ensuring a public process, determining roles and responsibilities, establishing group expectations, and developing and signing a shared governance agreement so that you'd have a good way to make decisions together. Step 2 is probably the most technically heavy part of planning. During this step, the planning collaborative develops a shared understanding of their water resources and looks at the existing and future in-stream and out-of-stream water needs for people, the economy, and the environment. Agencies will help support some of this technical work, but it also relies on local data and information. Step 3 is when a collaborative takes all the information gathered in step 2 and uses it to identify the critical water issues in their basin. These provide the basis for developing your targeted solutions or strategies. It's an opportunity for planning collaboratives to learn together and look at your best approaches. Step 4 is when the collaborative takes their prioritized strategies and develops an integrated work plan that outlines how these strategies will be implemented. And the final step, step 5, is when the collaborative adopts their final plan and then requests state recognition for that plan. And again, you join the network. Next slide. This brings us to the 3rd phase of planning, which is plan implementation. During this phase, collaboratives work together to actually do the work, to implement the various strategies and projects you identified. You maintain your state recognition and you fill out a biennial report. And the 4 initial pilots are currently in this phase, so I'll let Herb talk more about that. Next slide. The final phase is plan updates. Plan update frequency is based on the need to develop new strategies or actions because of significant changes locally. We generally recommend that you consider updating your plan every 10 to 15 years. Next slide. So OWRD will have grant funding available in early 2026. The applications will come out to support each of the first 3 phases: prep, plan development, and implementation. We expect to announce an open solicitation cycle early this year. Next slide. So for more information on that funding cycle or on the program in general, you can visit our website at the address on the screen. And if Lili, you might pop it in the chat, that would be fantastic. You can also reach out directly to Lili at either of the email addresses on the screen. Also, Lili, could you pop those in the chat? And you can also find her email on the place-based water planning website. So I'm sure there's a number of questions about the upcoming grant cycle. Happy to answer those. If you have any questions when you go to read the handbook or you think about the application or grant process, please feel free to reach out to Lili or myself. Lili can answer the more granular questions about place-based planning for sure. And that is what we had to share right now. We happy to take questions.
Great, thanks, Sue and Lili. And I'm going to introduce Herb Winters just very briefly. Herb is, as I mentioned at the outset, he's the district manager for the Gilliam Soil and Water Conservation District. He's one of the co-conveners for the Lower John Day Place-Based Water Planning Pilot Program. He co-convenes with the SWCD with the Watershed Council there. I think Debbie Bunch is also here from the Lower John, his co-convener with that program. So thank you for being here. So the pilots, as Sue mentioned, had occurred. They've gone through this process. I think they got to learn the long way, and then we're going to benefit from their experience. So thank you, Herb, for your time and for being willing to share with us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jill. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you folks. Before I get started, is my presentation coming across well?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay. So I'll just talk a little bit about me first. I'm the district manager for the Gilliam SWCD here in North Central Oregon. I've been working for SWCDs for a little over 17 years. I'm super lucky that I get to work in the place where I was raised. I was born here, and I get to help folks in my community improve it. So I feel very fortunate. But that being said, I'm not someone who lives for planning. I like to get things done. So what I want this kind of to talk about, and I'm going to try to cover some things that, was a years long process in a little under 20 minutes. So it's going to be pretty high level, but I am very excited about the Q&A section. So for us, like, planning is how we built a runway for implementation. So I kind of want to focus on that, this is all about getting work done in your place. And also, I'm not here to tell folks in the Rogue how to collaborate. Every basin is different. I want to share with you what it looked like in the Lower John Day pilot, what worked, what surprised us, and what I do a little differently so that you can move toward locally led voluntary implementation with fewer surprises. So let's jump into that. We'll just talk a little bit about our place, which is the Lower John Day. You saw a map earlier of the pilots. This is just a little bit more zoomed in. In the red hash, that is the Lower John Day. The greater map there is the entire John Day Basin. So that's just kind of our planning area to give you guys an idea. Yeah, everything. We have water scarcity issues like everywhere else in Oregon. We have The John Day River is very special, being undammed. We have a great mid-sea Columbia steelhead run that flourishes in our basin. It's a big priority of ours, and we have irrigation and things like that going on. So I think our water scarcity issues are may not be exactly the same, but they're there. They exist, and we need to come up with solutions for those. So with that, I'm going to kind of get into the origin story of how we got into place-based planning. So let me get my notes so I don't screw up here. We really we chose to be proactive. We wanted to plan early so local solutions stay local. We weren't reacting to a single kind of overnight emergency, but we could see constraints and pressure building, and we didn't want to wait until we were forced into decisions. So when the pilot opportunity opened, we were able to move because we weren't starting from zero. We had relationships enough and structure to begin. Just to let you folks know, we also have a John Day Basin partnership, which is kind of another group in our area, and the Lower John Day is kind of a subgroup of that. I won't get into the details, but I bring it up because we had already kind of started forming as a group, very similar to what you folks are doing. And so we had our relationships ready, and this grant opportunity for the pilots, it came up. And so we built the group up intentionally. We started with once we went into place-based planning mode, we started with stakeholder list, but we really didn't want to figure out like who's missing. Like Debbie, my co-convener, she said it very well. The effort was expanded and made stronger by involving a balance of representation. That balance mattered, but it only worked if your structure and rules are clear. And I'll get more into that. So actually, that's a great segue into kind of our next slide, which is the governance and participation, kind of the rules of the road. So, the way we govern ourselves is one of the biggest reasons that this worked. I've heard it over and over again. You want to have those governance documents, squared away to be successful. So we wrote the rules of the road early, so we weren't renegotiating process every meeting. That protected momentum and our local control. We kept the government simple. One organization, one vote. We aimed for consensus, and we couldn't get it all the way there. Consensus minus 10%. Let us keep moving instead of stalling out. On participation, we had 17 parties at the table across agencies, tribes, local government, landowners, NGOs. Just to make it real, we had a couple of SWCDs. We had our local Cattlemen's Association. We had Water Watch, DQ, the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. It's just some examples who was at the table. And then just one thing to add, the facilitator, having an outside facilitator was absolutely critical for us. That facilitator did the work of process so our partners could focus on substance, especially with our capacity strapped co-conveners and our partners. That's a big thing for us. We don't have a lot of capacity. My office, I have 3 employees. Debbie is a one-person office for her watershed council. So capacity is low, and having that facilitator really did help. So move on. Now I'm going to go into like how it worked, kind of our timelines and prioritization. So here's what's working together looked like in practice. This was when it wasn't a sprint. It was a sustained work over multiple years. We worked through step 1 through step 5 in a pretty logical progression. And we used a steady cadence and committee structure so the full group could stay decision focused. We relied quite a bit on subcommittees. They did the heavy lift, technical work, draft, what are our options, and then brought recommendations back to the full group. When we hit prioritization, we made it explicit and visible. We used tools like dot voting to rank critical issues, and the key was transparency. Right, people could see how priorities rose to the top, and they could challenge it in real time. And then, moving on, I just want to be honest about 2 things that surprised us as we got deeper into the process. So kind of a big surprise, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but this was again, through a pilot process. So we were kind of learning as we went, right? And so you know, some big ones, you know, our biggest water situation learning wasn't a single number. It was the data gaps. This was big. Step two focus forced us to inventory what we knew and what we didn't know, and that's where this kind of first hidden monster showed up. The amount of technical writing it takes to turn that reality into a plan that stands up. So kind of like, bottom line is, if you don't resource the technical writing, in our experience, with our group, it becomes a bottleneck. So we were really lucky to have a strong technical capacity, in our partnership, someone with the GIS and the hydrology skills who could carry that heavy step two technical work, plus OWRD support and the subcommittees that I mentioned earlier. For example, I just want to credit Spencer Swaski. He carried a huge technical load for us. He was with Freshwater Trust at the time. Now he's with ODF and W. But having that really good technical savvy person on our team really helped us through this process. So I would encourage folks in this group to be thinking, where are your Spencers in your place? What I do a little differently, so to line up a neutral technical writer early to free up participant time, have subcommittees own their pieces and define what's good enough, what it looks like, so you don't chase perfection. I think that's another thing that we kind of got hung up on, with some of this. Once the writing load is in motion, the next reality stacks on top of it, which is kind of participation fatigue, which I know if anyone's been involved in any of these planning things, that's a real thing. And I just want to talk about it a little bit. Basically, over multiple years, the same people end up carrying the meetings, committees, outreach, and drafting. This was our group. This is what we experienced. There's some tough folks that stuck it out and did a lot of this work. We learned that fatigue isn't a moral failure. It's a capacity reality, right? Like if you don't plan for it, you slowly shrink your table to the people with the most available time, not necessarily the people you need. So two things help. Like I said earlier, using the subcommittees intentionally for the heavy lift and build multiple on-ramps for folks to participate. Surveys, review windows, one-on-one check-ins with your partners, so people could stay engaged even if they couldn't attend every meeting. That fatigue is a real deal, and you got to find a way to get past it. This is where facilitation and governance mattered for us. Having those clear rules and a facilitator helps protect our relationships while keeping decisions moving. It's a big part. So now we got kind of the hard stuff out of the way. I want to talk about benefits. Like at the end of the day, this was a great process for us. We had those kind of hidden monsters, but here's why we stuck with it, and it paid off over time. First, and this has been mentioned earlier by Sue, it's like having that balanced representation. The plan didn't feel like it belonged to one interest group. It belonged to the place. Second is, having better decision rules. Governance became the difference between meeting and deciding, especially when the work got heavy. Third, is that implementation runway. I think that's really important. It was really important for our group. Implementation was always in the back of a lot of our partners' minds, but we still had to get through the planning first. But that always kind of kept us going. And then the plan, it doesn't fund projects by itself, but it gave us a credible roadmap and partnerships that made bigger implementation funding possible. In our base, and examples of programs we've pursued, include the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board's Folks Investment Partnership, and we work with NRCS to get an RCPP in our area, and I'd be happy to talk about that in the Q&A session. but balanced table, clear rules, and a shared story. That's what made us progress towards funding and the major implementation that we're doing right now. Now I'll kind of go into kind of the lessons learned. This is kind of steal this if you want kind of list. Lesson one, and I keep repeating myself, but this was really the things when I was putting this talk together that rose to the top, and also going through the evaluation of the pilots, is starting with governance, write the rules of the road early, or you'll spend your best energy negotiating and renegotiating process. Lesson two, again, partner alignment beats perfect technical work. You can always improve data and analysis, but if the partners aren't aligned on priorities and willing to pull together, the plan won't turn into action. Lesson three, again, facilitation for us wasn't really optional. With limited capacity, the facilitator does the work of process so the rest of you can do the hard work of substance. Lesson four is, build multiple ways to participate so the plan isn't shaped by whoever has the most time. I think that's a big one too. And another thing is, what I do a little differently is I partner early on with OWRD to align expectations in everything. And it's, this process has changed, and so I think that OWRD is aware of that, and they learn that through the pilots. So basically, of course, when you get into this is, making sure everybody's on the same page and what setting expectations. And another thing, if I were to do things a little bit differently, I would have explored other funding probably more aggressively. Looking at maybe the OWEB technical assistance grants or similar grants that are available. If you saw there's a hard nut to crack technically and you needed some like a consultant or to bring in someone to the table to help you with this, I wish that we would have kind of explored that a little bit more. That's a big one for me. And then I'll on, kind of, some of the things that Sue talked about, with what folks learned from the pilots, this, one thing I want to, make clear is that, you guys won't be repeating the same pilot experience that we did. The newer guidance in the state is, is operationalizing what the pilots learned the hard way, right? We came out of the pilots with kind of like a bloody nose and a limp, but we got it, and we have a great plan moving forward. But again, it was just like when you go through pilots, that's just the name of the game. And it was good that we knew that. Anyways, it adds, the guidance, it has readiness phase up front, like Sue said, and it commits to technical assistance packages at the start of step two. So the early technical lift doesn't totally land on volunteers like it did with our group. It also shifts towards a funding ladder that supports work beyond just writing a plan, including the post plan coordination that Sue mentioned. And again, I think something to be careful, and Sue kind of mentioned it, is like, you need to be, understand, that what state agencies have capacity to help you with, that those are things to, keep in mind as you move forward. And so like, you might just be prepared you might have to handle some of this locally, even with state agency help. Let's see, look at my notes. So I'd say the most important thing I'll say at this time is that we're in implementation mode now, and it's working. We have a lot of on the ground work that is happening thanks to this plan. That's why we did the planning in the first place, to improve our place with practical, locally led work. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the planning process or what implementation looks like. And what I care about is, helping you to keep this locally led and practical. How can we make this easier through this Q&A, governance, partner alignment, workload, implementation? So I'd just like to, I guess I'll be done with my talk there. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.